shout out to the guys that are on the call here today and let them introduce themselves. So, Kevin Sullivan is the senior solution engineer at Evolve IP. And we've also got Curtis Gaska on the call as well. And Curtis is kind of the Microsoft guru over there at Evolve IP. He knows Teams and knows the Microsoft licensing piece of what's going on in the market. And then Zach Anderson is on the call with me too. Zach is the marketing extraordinaire guru over there at Evolve IP. So anything you see out in the marketplace has probably got Zach's hands on it. So guys, Kevin, you want to start introducing yourself real quick?
Yeah. So first and foremost, again, Derek, thanks for having us back. Really appreciate the opportunity to engage in these discussions. And for folks who've been part of the earlier conversations, I'm sure they know I like to talk at length about some of these things. So always love the opportunity to do it, and nothing better than having a microphone in front of me, right? But so again, Kevin Sullivan, I'm the director of solutions engineering here at Evolve IP, specifically focused on our compute practice. So hosted infrastructure, desktop as a service, business continuity, disaster recovery, backup, and then all the tools and managed service components that run on those things. So again, thank you for the time. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Curtis?
Yeah, nice to meet all of you, and thanks again, Derek. As Derek had mentioned, Curtis Gaska, sales engineer with Evolve IP. Really, my role or responsibility is work with our customers, our prospects, understand their needs and requirements, more specific around our unified communications and contact center platforms that we operate here out of Evolve IP. So really looking forward to the conversation today. And yeah, thanks again, Derek.
You're welcome. Thank you, Curtis. Zach?
Hi, I am Zach Anderson, and I am the one of the marketing managers here at Evolve IP. Not sure if extraordinaire or guru is exactly how I would describe myself, but I do my best. So thanks for having me, Derek.
Yeah, well, you do a good job, Zach. We appreciate it. So, guys, we talked a little bit. This is episode 3 of our 3-part series with you guys. And first episode, Kevin, we had a lot of discussion about infrastructure, kind of where the market is, different hypervisors. If you guys missed that episode, I would highly encourage you to go back and watch that one because that was real insightful. And then we got into, in episode 2, a little bit about cybersecurity because it seems like every discussion has a cybersecurity component to it, whether it's voice, whether it's data, right? Data loss prevention. There's always this cybersecurity component to it. And so we wanted to cover that. But what I really want to talk about and kind of what we see in the market and where things are going is, where you guys are kind of headed with this whole office in a box. But before I get into that real quick, I'll share my screen. I'll talk a little bit about what we do, who we are, in case you guys missed the first 2 episodes. And then if you've got a question, drop it in the chat. We'll have monitors in there, guys monitoring that chat. And if we can get to your question during the call, we certainly will. If not, we will certainly follow up with you and try to answer your questions. So let me share my screen real quick and I'll talk a little bit about Vocal Point, and believe me, I am brief. So Vocal Point Consulting, who are we? At the core, we are technology advisors, right? So we want to empower business leaders when it comes to making technology decisions. We are just, consultants, and we're there to point you in the right direction. If you come to us and tell us, you've got a particular project that you want to do, my first question isn't going to be, who do you want us to quote? It's going to be why. So we're the guys that are going to ask why, and we're going to try to build around that why. So that's really who we are at our core. And that comes in really 6 different areas. Number 1 is if we can, we would really prefer to do a technology audit. That means ingressing all your billing on wireless, wireline, software, cloud, all of that billing that you have, circuits and, all your multiple circuits that you have for multiple locations. If we can have an understanding of what you're spending money on today, then it gives us a better platform to be able to create a lifecycle management platform that gives us visibility into the near future of how we can, help you with those projects. And then really we want to get into that technology planning piece where we're putting together a scope of work, figuring out, the why, how do we solve for why, and then we'll figure out the solution providers that we think are going to be best suited to solve that problem. And that's where the vendor procurement comes in. So we're not just guys that go out and get contracts and quotes for customers. We actually will dig into the contracts. We'll, basically go after the SLAs and shore up SLAs. We'll write term and termination clauses in contracts to help the client make sure it's not slanted toward the vendor. And then where we go from there is really we get into the contract negotiation. Just like I said, when it comes to vendor procurement, it's not about just, bringing a vendor to the table. We want to know that that contract is written for our customer and it's going to be a good long-term contract. Project management, if, the client's buying through us, well, then we, provide that project management free of charge. That's where we're going to come to the table and make sure everything gets installed on budget and on time. And then if a client wants, we can actually let them, use our support RMM tool. We have a full remote monitoring and management platform that we can have full visibility into circuits, be able to proactively monitor those circuits and be able to handle any trouble tickets a lot quicker when we have that monitoring going on. So that's us in a nutshell. And what I want to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And Kevin, I want to, well, actually, I think even Zach, I'll hand it to you first, Zach, because I want to, you know, give it to you to talk a little bit about where you guys, from Evolve IP's overall perspective, have you guys seen the market shifts to where it's caused you to move in this direction? Because we're going to talk about this whole office in a box today. Why is the market moving that direction? And, why are you guys, even from a marketing perspective, pushing this? So, Zach, can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. And we kind of touched on this in the first episode, but there's a few themes that are happening in the marketplace today. One of which is the ability to effectively manage IT resources, right? So hardware, people, right? The other is having a hybrid or remote work strategy. So Gartner would tell you that in 2024, 81% of all organizations have to have a hybrid or remote work strategy. Otherwise, you will fall behind the modern employee. What modern employees need, what they are comfortable with nowadays, given what we've gone through in the past few years. And also with our partners that we work with, like you, Derek. So the big thing is, as far as managing vendors, managing resources, consolidation is a big thing today. And so where Office in a Box came from is sort of out of this conversation of how do we make all of the things that we do more easily accessible and easier to, provide in a streamlined way to our, prospective end user customers. And so, we put together a couple of pricing packages, and we just came up with, the different SKUs as Office in a Box is today. And I can sort of go through what that looks like. But the point is we just wanted a better way to explain, what the optimal situation looks like for, consolidating solutions for companies that have to have a hybrid work strategy and have to have a better means of managing their IT resources, both hardware and people. And generally, what we find is, um, IT staffs are very uh, they're overburdened, they're overstressed. They're forced to do more with less, or as Kevin would say, they're forced to do more with less. Um, and so what that means is, there's less people to do to put time into the strategic initiatives that they're directed to do by their leadership. And they have to do more tactical things, patching, monitoring, managing, stuff like that, across a vast array of different pieces of hardware, different types of laptops. If they have servers on prem, all those things require somebody to touch them, manage them, stuff like that. Um, and so as we kind of talked about, what Evolve IP does in this sort of work anywhere mentality or go to market mission, that's really what Office in a Box is. It's cloud IT fully managed by us, so that end user organizations, i.e., their IT staff, have more time to do the things that they really need to be doing, which is propelling their organization forward, more technologically speaking, or advancing their technological posture. But essentially, uh, that's where this whole thing came from. We wanted a better way of showing how Evolve IP can, you know, uh, take a company's legacy IT resources or legacy IT posture and modernize it, future proof it, without having 12 different vendors to choose from, and uh, you know more difficulty managing those different resources. So that's kind of where it came from. And again, that's generally where the market is moving. They have less resources to work with. They have to do more with less. They have to consolidate to survive because they don't really have the resources to manage all the different relationships with vendors. And so that's where we come in.
Cool. Well, thank you, Zach. I appreciate that. So Kevin, I think I'll hand it over to you. Tell me a little bit about, from a design perspective, because you're on the engineering side. What are you seeing in the marketplace, and why is the market kind of headed in this direction?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, right? And Derek, when you were sharing your screen earlier, I couldn't help but admire the logo, right? And the logo being the kind of overlapping puzzle pieces that form the cloud. And the reason that kind of jumped out at me is I think that ties in so much to what we're talking about today, right? Those different puzzle pieces, in this case, representing things like security, mobility, communications capability. So how can we tie all of the things that we discussed in terms of, what are the needs of an organization from an infrastructure perspective in terms of virtualization and where their stuff lives? How do we then connect people to that stuff? And then, the other kind of 800-pound gorilla in the room, end user experience coupled with, or yeah, end user computing coupled with customer experience, right? So maybe tying those things together in a banner of like end user enablement. So not just the ability to connect our people to their resources, but to do so in a highly efficient, highly productive manner that not only allows them access to the data they need when they need it to run the applications they need to run in order to do their job, but also layer in the things that they need from a communications perspective that are what truly make people mobile. We've always had the ability to connect people to resources remotely, right? I think the thing that's been new and different in these last few years, and one of the things that makes the Office in a Box approach unique, is that it ties together the unified communications and contact center capabilities alongside things like, remote access to your operating system and your applications. So one of the things that for us is really a cornerstone of the offering is, providing that desktop experience, but with voice enabled teams embedded within it that can run in an optimized fashion. So not only just having the containerization that desktop provides you from a security perspective, but knowing that once your folks, your users connect into that, they're doing the entirety of the work that they need to do in that secure, stable environment that you have much higher degree of managerial control over. So on that topic, Curtis, I know, especially when it comes to teams, maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of what's leading the charge there, what we're seeing in the market on the Evolve side as to, how and why folks are gravitating toward Teams, and how the interaction of that with the other things folks are doing from an end user computing perspective is important.
Yeah, and also, Curtis, before you even get into that, one of the things I want to ask you too is why Teams? Why not BroadSoft? Why not, a Metaswitch? Why are we doing Teams? And talk a bit about, like Kevin said, how you guys are, moving in that direction. Why?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I think it all comes back to that comment that Zach had kind of made when he was going through his spiel. There was a Gartner study done a few years ago that by 2024, and funny, I've been saying this for a couple of years, here we are now in 2024, that by 2024, 80% of IT organizations are going to start to prioritize their collaboration applications over their telephony platform. And the reason for that being is that what I'm seeing out there in the marketplace is that organizations want to consolidate. They don't want to have a legacy phone system platform. They don't want to have to also then aside next to that have their collaboration platform, that being a Teams, a WebEx, a Zoom, any of those collab apps that are out there in the marketplace today. They want to collapse all of that down for ease of management purposes, for cost savings purposes, and honestly, to give their employees a much better end user experience across the organization itself. So at Evolve IP, we've been doing unified communication services, historically running Cisco BroadSoft since 2007. Like, it's our heritage, it's our DNA. But really where we saw the marketplace going was towards this collaboration application perspective. And in 2019, really started to make that decision. We're going to take our services, our backend telephony services, and inject those, plug those into these collaboration applications. And at the time, this is kind of pre-pandemic, Microsoft Teams was already at that time a market leader in terms of collaboration application that was out there in the marketplace. Big reason for that is Office 365. It comes with your Office 365 licensing for end users today. So many shops out there are running Office 365 and Microsoft. So Teams is a natural deployment for them to be able to run that across their organization. But we made that decision in 2019. We're going to go ahead and take our phone services, inject those into Microsoft Teams, and really now follow what we're predicting will end up being true for the Gartner statement, is that organizations are going to start to focus more on collaboration applications. They're not going to want that separate telephony system. So that's really where we kind of come into play in regards to telephony combined with collaboration.
So Curtis, let me ask you, because the majority of businesses out there are already running some form of Microsoft software in-house. So if they've already got the 365 licensing, how does that play into what you guys are doing, and how do you approach that if they've already got, say all the E3, E5 licenses, whatever they are these days? I know Microsoft changes the names of them all the time, but talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's not a problem for us. We work with customers who bring their own Microsoft licensing. On the flip side of that, we're also a gold premier support provider of Microsoft and a CSP. So we sell licensing to customers as well. And we look at Office in the Box, we have a couple of different solutions, one that includes licensing, one that doesn't. So if customers already have a relationship with the CSP, if they already have an enterprise agreement with Microsoft, it's not a problem for them to continue with those relationships and to bring that own licensing to bear.
And are they paying any premium to have
scenario.
your license or have the licensing with you guys? Is there any premium for that?
Not necessarily a dollar premium. What I will say is that with us being a premier level provider of Microsoft, supports can run through Evolve IP. So any Microsoft issues that need to be escalated to Microsoft on the customer's behalf can all run through our premier level support. Kind of allows customers to skip tier 1 and go directly to tier 2, tier 3 resources at Microsoft. So it's just a value add that we bring to the table there.
Cool. Thanks. So, I think, Kevin, what I'd love to do is maybe share a little bit about, if you guys can, what does this look like? Because, and Zach, you've heard me talk about this. You and I had a discussion about, I believe that there's going to come a day when you walk into the, buy a new computer and you're literally buying a shell, and you're going to get your CPU, your RAM, your storage, and probably even your bandwidth from the cloud, right? So the consumer end of that is coming. But what I want to ask is, can you guys share, what this looks like from Evolve IP's stance? And, how are we pricing this out? And how are you guys making it economical?
I can walk through that really quick. Let me share something. So, and I'm gonna sort of walk backwards here to make this point, but and Kevin might be able to do this more eloquently than I. But essentially, what we're doing with regards to a shell, Kevin would call it sort of like a dummy terminal. But the beauty about it is we're taking all these things that traditionally managed IT or legacy IT staff has to do, and we're putting all those things into one place, right? The cloud. And so what happens is we go from, these 15 different things on, 100 plus different PCs, and essentially moving them all into one nicely packaged bundle, which is fully managed cloud IT. And so the benefits of that is, obviously, like I said, it's all fully managed by us. It inherently becomes secure and compliant, like we talked about on the last episode. And in a lot of ways, not only in dollars and cents, it's less expensive, but there's some other intangible costs that come down as well, like we mentioned before, with less time to provision, things like that. That all plays into it as well. But how we came up with this is, we took into consideration that sometimes customers will bring their own piece of this pie, right? So on the right, you can see we don't have Microsoft licensing included with that. That happens occasionally, right? Or what happens is they happen to have their own licensing and they migrate that over to us, and it's essentially the same cost, right? With the added benefit that we are a CSP. The other thing that happens sometimes is maybe customer already has a security suite that they are employing, or maybe they already have a backup solution. That's okay. It's sort of like plug and play. You bring your piece of the pie there, and we'll cover everything else. And by the way, this isn't everything that we do. There's a myriad of other things that we can employ alongside this that are obviously complementary, but that will further round out the sort of cloud IT security stack that we can enable our end user prospects. So Kevin can certainly speak to, or either Kevin or Curtis can speak to, like how this how this can be put into play. But that's sort of the visual component that I wanted to bring to bear.
Yeah, and I was going to add, as far as adoption and what this looks like in terms of client devices and that process, right? One of the big things with this solution is you're not only helping to inherently make your environment more secure, to Zach's point, or more compliant, and those two things relatively go hand in hand. But you're also really simplifying the logistics of the operations of your IT department, right? You can get yourself out of that habit of having to constantly procure devices, provision devices, and provide devices out there to your users, which was hard enough when everyone was in the same office building. And, you just had to set up a laptop or desktop and run it down the hallway to someone's office. Now you have a distributed workforce that might be scattered all across the city, the state, the country, the globe. So that those logistical challenges have only gotten harder in the last few years. So now, things like scalability, elasticity, right? The ability to very quickly onboard and offboard people, eliminating the need for device reclamation if someone leaves the organization. All those things can be done much easier by having folks use a device, and we'll come back to what that means, but use a device to access this cloud-based environment, this cloud-based desktop where they're doing their work. So what is that device? Well, Derek, to your point, right? It's not even necessarily a lofty goal of the future. You can walk into a big box shop today and buy a thin client, right? Or a zero
Right.
client, and take that home, plug it in, connect it up to a couple monitors, and use that as your conduit to get to another machine hosted elsewhere where you're going to do your work. I'm a huge proponent, though, when we have these conversations with organizations. Look, if your company can support a BYOD model, bring your own device, or folks can leverage equipment that they already have on hand, the security enablement pieces of this solution allow for easier adoption of that strategy. So if that's something that is an organizational fit for you from a philosophical and political perspective, awesome. That'll go a long way to solving a lot of your problems, because now you can completely remove any of your organization's management needs of those devices and just let folks use what they already have. For companies that either can't or won't, right? They might not necessarily be able to quite make that philosophical leap yet. The biggest win is you don't have to replace your devices at all, right? A lot of folks tend to look at a DaaS solution or something like Office in a Box as an alternative to doing a hardware refresh or in tandem with doing a hardware refresh. I like to flip that on its head, right? If you're in that market, that time frame where a hardware refresh is starting to make sense for your client devices, a solution like this extends the life cycle of those devices. You can basically use them until they just stop working, and at that point, worry about replacing them with whatever the cheapest option in the market is at the
Yeah,
time.
that's what I was going to ask you too, Kevin, was if somebody is like at that, refresh cycle, maybe it's been 5, 6, 7 years, and they want to refresh everything. Maybe they want to go thin client, and and buy Wise terminals or whatever. Is that going to be through you, or do they have to procure those outside, and then you guys help them set them up? And what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that procurement wouldn't be something that we would be directly involved in. We've learned a lesson over the last couple decades, which is we excel on the cloud side of the equation. Once we start to kind of reach out to things that are outside the purview of our own data centers, um, it's just not an area where we're strong. So we really want to play to our strengths and do the things that we do well often, and make sure those are repeatable processes. So we don't really work on the client side hardware procurement or provisioning piece. However, my advice to any customer who's starting to go down this path, hopefully with us, but if not with whomever, anytime you're working with a vendor, work with that vendor to solidify the solution first, and then springboard out of that conversation to looking at what the devices would be on the back end. One of the biggest mistakes you could make is going into a solution like this, having already made some form of a commitment to specific hardware devices, thin clients, laptops, desktops, because there is somewhat of a relationship on the back end of what devices support what platforms and what providers. The easiest example I can think of that is to our example here, right, with Office in a Box, where you're running collaboration suite like Teams in a hosted desktop. The way real-time audio and video optimization in that hosted desktop work will have some color to what your device would look like if you were to go with a thin client device. You basically, long story short, you need to make sure the thin client you would look to use supports RTAV optimization in a solution like VMware Horizon or Citrix.
Gotcha. So, um, I guess really where we're at right now is, you know, we've talked about the infrastructure, we've talked about the security, and now we're bringing this all into this Office in a Box, but we haven't really talked about, say, end user applications, right? So, what if I'm, running my own, say, my own homemade CRM, or, I've got a ERP that just doesn't play well in the cloud. How do you guys approach that piece of it so that a client can have the security and the benefits of the cloud and the scalability and elasticity of the cloud without, that one maybe application?
Yeah. So one of the best things that a cloud provider like Evolve can provide to our customers is flexibility. Now, the downside of that, when you're in our position having a conversation like this, is the answer tend to be it depends. Um, so that's not a cop out. It always sounds like one, but the good thing is when it comes to that flexibility, the options that we provide are, look, if you have the capability and you can do so, migrating the back end that supports that in-house CRM or ERP application, whatever that legacy server infrastructure that's still just kind of a vestigial boat anchor hanging out in a data center or a closet somewhere in your building. Migrating that stuff as hosted infrastructure in tandem with a Office in a Box or desktop as a service solution can really go a long way toward, hey, now not only am I taking where my people are doing their work and putting them here, but I'm also taking the stuff that they're working on and putting it directly adjacent to it. So, proximity breeds productivity, right? Those two things living directly next door to one another are going to make for better application performance, better user experience, quicker response times. Now, there are some cases where that's not desirable, some cases where that might not be practical. So if an organization wants to continue running their backend in another location, hopefully not in their office, but that can be acceptable as well. Or in a data center where they already are, or maybe they've already managed to migrate some of that stuff to the public cloud. You can establish connectivity from our data centers where we would host DAS to those other locations and connect to those resources that way. We just want to make sure if we're doing that, part of our discovery process up front is kind of workflowing out and diagramming where all these things are and what those touch points are, how they interact with one another, because we want to be cognizant of latency. Now, when I say that, and I say that in terms of end user computing, everybody immediately gravitates toward, well, of course we want to be conscientious of latency, the latency between the end user and the hosted desktop and wherever those two things are. That's important. But I would make the claim that what is more important is then the latency that exists on the back end of where that desktop is and where the back end resources that it's talking to from an infrastructure server perspective are. Those two things are in the same data center. No concerns there whatsoever. But if those are SaaS applications, if they're hosted in another data center, if they're in the public cloud, if you have some like geo diversity in terms of where things are hosted, we just want to make sure that that factors into it, right? How does that application or those applications play in terms of latency, right? Do they have high latency tolerance, especially with some older legacy applications that folks may have had a cloud aversion to anyway? That cloud aversion may have its infancy in the fact that that application doesn't play well when it's not on an internal LAN because the latency ends up negatively impacting it. So that's all stuff that will come out over the course of doing that discovery and getting into some of those early conversations with a prospect. But the good news, again, from a flexibility perspective, we have ways to solve for all of those things. It's just a matter of figuring out, which specific iteration of the problem we're looking to solve.
So you're basically saying it depends.
Yes. Put simply, it depends.
Yeah. So
total cop out.
No, that's good. So I know we're at the end of our time here, and I want to be, mindful of everybody's time on this call. So any parting words that you would have? I guess, Curtis, I'll start off with you. Any parting words that you have about the market, the Office in a Box solution, why you guys feel like you're moving in this direction or the market's moving in this direction? So, and then, I'll let you guys wrap it up as well.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, any type of parting words would be for, if you are an organization that's looking to go down this route and to really eliminate your telephony needs or requirements and pair that into a collaboration app, be sure that you are solidified first and foremost on the collaboration application that it is that you want to deploy, that you want to standardize on across your environment. Can't tell you how many customers I work with that might have WebEx, Jabber, Teams, Zoom, all of those throughout their deployment, their organization. Oh, let's consolidate that down, have that conversation with Evolve IP. We can work across any of those collaboration applications that you might have in place today to really inject those telephony needs. So that'd be my advice to you as a customer. And again, going back to the Office in a Box, make sure you're aligning yourself with providers like Evolve IP that have experience in not only delivering the hosted desktop solution itself, but also now when you're bringing things like collaboration and voice into that experience with that real-time audio and video, and make sure that they have kind of their optimizations about them to be able to run applications like that within a hosted desktop environment.
Thanks, Curtis. Great points. Kevin?
Yeah. So again, can't tell you how much appreciate being able to be in these conversations. But as far as closing thoughts go, look, especially when it comes to Office in a Box, I think we've covered a lot of the really great things about the infrastructure and security pieces in those conversations. But the cool thing with me from a provider's perspective is that, look, bundles are great. They're great conversation starters. And what Office in a Box is as a bundle. When the rubber hits the road, if I'm a customer, bundles are built with the intention of being unbundled, right? Once that conversation is started, then it's a matter of kind of going through and saying, like, look, here's all the stuff on the menu, and we have the ability to package all of that for you in one easy, digestible solution. But to Zach's point earlier, if there are parts in here that you don't need, that might be superfluous to your organization, that might be redundant to things that you're already doing, the last thing in the world that I want to do as a provider is come into a customer and say, hey, you have a security solution that you know and love. Look, get rid of it. You're going to use this one now, right? It just doesn't make sense. So, just seeing all these things together is great, but know that going into this type of conversation, the ultimate goal here is to solve your specific business challenges, and we will likely unbundle this solution in order to do that, to make sure that it's the right fit for your organization.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin. Zach, any parting words?
Nothing as eloquent as Curtis or Kevin, but I would just say if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to certainly Derek or Curtis or Kevin. We do this stuff all the time, and we'll make time to answer all the questions you might have. So just appreciate everybody's time, and looking forward to working with you.
Yes.
I noticed he left himself off that list.
Oh, yeah, he did, didn't he? Yeah, Zach doesn't want any phone calls or emails. Direct them all to Kevin and Curtis. So yeah, I mean, if you guys missed one of the first episodes or the first two episodes that we did, I would highly recommend going back and watching those. There's a lot of great stuff in there when we're talking about infrastructure and cybersecurity, but it all kind of goes into this, bundle of how do we consolidate those services like Curtis is talking about, and how do we help companies scale, but not have to go and, hire 4 or 5 people to, maintain these platforms. There's a lot of great cloud solutions out there. Evolve IP is just one of the, 700 different providers that we have in our portfolio these days. And they do a great job with that white glove service. So again, if you guys have questions, drop them in the chat. We'll get to you, I promise. But till the next time, man, this was a great discussion. I really appreciate all the info.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Derek?
Have a good day. Bye.